My daughter-in-law started calculating my expenses like I was a burden. Hi, my name is Marisela. Marisela Vega. I am 83 years old, and I live in a little house in San Antonio, Texas. Not alone, no. I live with my son, my daughter-in-law, and their 2 children. I moved in with them 3 years ago when my knee started giving me trouble and my doctor said it was not safe for me to climb the stairs in my old apartment anymore. I spent 41 years of my life working as a school librarian. 41 years of organizing books, helping children find stories they loved, making sure every single child who walked through those library doors felt seen and welcome. I retired when I was 78, not because I wanted to, but because my body said enough is enough. Marisela, sit down. And so I did. I sat down. I came to live here in this house with my son Ramon and his wife, Diane. And for a while, things were fine. For a while, things felt like family. I thought I had found my soft place to land after all those years of working, all those years of doing everything alone. I thought I was home. I was wrong. Now I am sitting here at this kitchen table, the same table where I cook breakfast every single morning, and I am going to tell you what has been happening in this house. I am going to tell you all of it, because I have been carrying this quietly for too long, and quiet is something I do very well, sometimes too well, and right now I need to speak. I need someone to actually hear what it is like to be 83 years old, to have given your whole life to other people, and then sit across from your own daughter-in-law and watch her show you a document she made, with your name typed neatly at the top, calculating exactly how much you cost her every single month. It started small, the way these things always do. Small comments, small looks, small silences that stretched just a little too long. Diane started making remarks about the grocery bill. Nothing direct at first, nothing she could not deny later if I brought it up. She would say things like, "Oh, the groceries are getting so expensive these days," while looking in my direction. Or she would sigh loudly when she came home from the store and say, "I spent so much again this week." And I would sit there at the kitchen table with my cup of tea and I would think, is she talking to me? Is she trying to tell me something? But I was not sure, so I said nothing. I am 83 years old. I have learned that sometimes silence is the wisest thing you can offer. Then came the electricity comments. Diane started turning off lights in rooms I was sitting in. Not rooms I had left empty, rooms I was actually in. I would be sitting in the living room reading, and she would walk in, look right at me, and say, "We need to stop leaving lights on. It is running up the bill." And she would turn off the lamp nearest to me and walk away. I would sit there in the dimmer light, book in my hand, wondering what I had done wrong just by existing in that room. I want to be clear about something. I am not a woman who sits around and does nothing. Every single morning I wake up at 6 and I make breakfast for the whole house. Ramon and Diane and the 2 grandchildren, little Marco who is 9 and sweet Elena who is 6. I cook eggs, I make fresh juice sometimes, I toast bread, I set the table. Every morning. I also do the laundry twice a week. I fold everything neatly, I put things away, I iron Ramon's shirts because he has never learned to do it properly, and he looks like a crumpled napkin when he irons his own clothes. I vacuum the living room and the hallways on Thursdays. I read to Elena every single night before her bedtime. I help Marco with his reading homework because, imagine that, a retired librarian living in your house, and you have access to her anytime you want. I do all of this without being asked. I do all of this because this is my family and I believe in contributing. I have never believed in sitting still and letting others carry everything alone. But none of that seemed to matter to Diane. About 4 months ago, Diane sat down at the kitchen table with her laptop open and a notepad beside her. Ramon was at work. The children were at school. It was just me and her in the house. I was sitting at the other end of the table with my tea, and I noticed her typing and writing things down, and I thought maybe she was paying bills or doing something for her job. She works in accounting, Diane does. Numbers are her whole world. So I thought nothing of it and I went back to my book. Then she looked up and she said, "Marisela, can we talk about something?" And something in her voice made my stomach tighten. Not because she sounded angry. She sounded polite. That particular kind of polite that is colder than any anger I have ever felt. The kind of polite that means someone has been planning what they're about to say for a very long time. I put my book down. I said, "Of course, Diane, what is it?" And she turned her laptop around and showed me a document. A spreadsheet. With my name at the top. Marisela Vega monthly household contribution and expense analysis. Those were the exact words. I am not making that up. I stared at that title for a moment, and I felt something in my chest go very still, the way things go still before something breaks. She had calculated everything. My portion of the grocery bill, which she had estimated at roughly $340 a month based on what she called my dietary needs and consumption patterns. My portion of the electricity bill, which she had worked out by calculating average usage per person and then adding what she called a senior adjustment because apparently older people use more electricity, she said, because of medical equipment and heating preferences. She had included my portion of the water bill, my portion of the internet bill, even though I used the internet maybe twice a week to video call my sister in New Mexico, and something she had listed as general household overhead, which she said covered things like wear and tear on the furniture and increased cleaning supply usage. The total she had come to was just over $800 a month. $812 to be exact. She had been very exact. She was always very exact, Diane. It was one of the things Ramon used to say he loved about her when they first got married. His mother had smiled and said, "Yes, she seems very precise." I had meant it as a compliment back then. I looked at that spreadsheet and I looked at my daughter-in-law and I asked her, very quietly, "What is this, Diane?" And she said, "I just think we need to be realistic about household expenses." She said it in that same cool, polite voice. She said, "I love you, Marisela, and I want you to be comfortable here, but Ramon and I are feeling the financial pressure, and I think it is only fair that we all sit down and look at the numbers together." I want to tell you how I felt in that moment. I want to be honest with you. Because I've been telling this to myself at night when I cannot sleep, and I want to say it right. I felt humiliated. That is the truest word I have. Not angry first, not hurt first. Humiliated. Because I have never in my 83 years made anyone feel like a burden. I raised Ramon alone after his father passed when Ramon was 11 years old. I worked full-time as a librarian and I came home every evening and I made dinner and I helped with homework and I went to every school event and every sports game and every single thing that child needed me to be present for, I was present. I saved money carefully all my life. I have a small pension for my years at the school district. I have my Social Security. I am not a wealthy woman, but I am not a helpless one either. And I had truly assumed, that when I came to live in this house it was because I was family. Not a tenant. Not a line item. Family. I did not cry in front of Diane. I am proud of that. I took a breath and I said, "I see." And I asked her if I could have some time to think about what she had shown me. She said of course, and she closed her laptop and she got up and she refilled her coffee cup and she acted like we had just discussed something perfectly normal. Like we had talked about what to have for dinner or what time the children needed to be picked up from school. I went in my room and I sat on the edge of my bed and I held my own hands in my lap because sometimes when I am upset that is what I do, I hold my own hands, and I sat there very quietly for a long time. Then I did something. I picked up my phone and I called my sister Carmen in New Mexico. Carmen is 79 and she is the sharpest person I have ever known in my entire life. I told her everything. I described the spreadsheet. I told her about the lights being turned off while I was in the room. I told her about the grocery comments and the electricity remarks, and I told her about sitting at that kitchen table looking at my name at the top of a document that had calculated exactly how much of a burden I was to the people I cooked breakfast for every single morning. Carmen listened to all of it without interrupting me, which is how I knew she was truly furious, because normally Carmen interrupts constantly. When she is furious, she goes very quiet. Like me. When I finished, she said, "Marisela, listen to me. Are you listening?" I said yes. She said, "You are going to handle this. And you are going to handle it your way. And your way has always been better than anyone else's way, so do not let this woman make you forget who you are." I held on to those words. I held on to them the way I used to hold on to Ramon's hand when he was small and we were crossing a busy street. Tight and with intention. I want you to know that I did not say anything to Ramon that night. I waited. I have always known that timing matters in difficult situations. As a librarian, I used to tell children that the best stories know exactly when to reveal the important part. You have to be patient. You have to let the story breathe. So I waited and I thought and I made my plan carefully and quietly. I started keeping a record. Every morning when I cooked breakfast, I wrote it down in a small notebook I keep in my cardigan pocket. Date, what I cooked, how many people I fed. When I did the laundry, I wrote it down. How many loads, whose clothes, how long it took. When I vacuumed, when I ironed Ramon's shirts, when I sat with Elena for her bedtime reading, when I helped Marco with his homework, when I cleaned the bathrooms, because yes, I cleaned the bathrooms too, and no one had ever once acknowledged that. I wrote all of it down. Every single thing. The date and the time and exactly what I had done. I also did some research. I am a librarian. Research is my native language. I looked up what household help costs in San Antonio. A housekeeper comes to a home twice a week costs between $150 and $200 each visit. A private tutor for elementary school children, which is essentially what I am for Marco, costs between $40 and $80 an hour. A professional home cook who prepares family meals costs between $25 and $50 per meal service. And an in-home companion or caregiver for an elderly person, which is ironic given the context, costs between $20 and $30 an hour. I added up everything I do in this house every single week, and I put a conservative dollar value on each thing. I did not inflate anything. I was careful and fair, the way I have always been careful and fair. I am not Diane, but I can work with numbers when I need to. The total I arrived at was conservative. Very conservative. But even being conservative, even undervaluing every single thing I contribute to this household, the number I came to was significantly more than $812 a month. Significantly more. I made my own spreadsheet. I asked Marco to help me format it nicely because he is 9 and he already knows more about computers than I do, and he sat with me one afternoon and helped me make it look neat and clear. He did not know what it was for. He just thought Grandma wanted to learn about spreadsheets. He was so proud of himself, helping me. He kept saying, "Grandma, you're actually really good at this." I told him he was an excellent teacher. I waited 3 weeks. I watched Diane. I watched her make her little comments and give her little looks, and I smiled pleasantly, and I made breakfast every morning, and I did the laundry, and I vacuumed, and I read to Elena, and I helped Marco, and I did not say one single word about the spreadsheet she had shown me. Then one evening Ramon came home from work, and we were all sitting at the dinner table together, and Diane said something that was the last straw. She said it so casually, so easily, like it was nothing. She was talking about a vacation they were thinking about, somewhere for spring break, and she said, "Well, of course we have to factor in increased household costs while we're gone. Managing the house for extra people is not cheap." And she looked at me when she said it. Just for a second. But long enough. Ramon did not notice. He was looking at his phone. The children were eating. Nobody else saw that look. But I saw it. I excused myself from the table politely, and I went to my room and I got my folder. I had printed everything out. My notebook record, my research on service costs, my spreadsheet. I had it all in a clean folder that I had asked Marco to label neatly. I brought it back to the dinner table and I sat down and I said, "I am sorry to interrupt dinner, but there is something I would like to share with the family." Ramon looked up from his phone. Elena looked up from her food. Marco watched me with big, curious eyes. Diane went very still. I opened my folder calmly. I said, "Diane, a few weeks ago you showed me a document that calculated my expenses in this household. I want you to know that I have been thinking about it very carefully. And I want to share some information with everyone." I could see Diane's jaw tighten. I could see her trying to decide how to respond and not being able to find the right thing fast enough. I turned to Ramon first. I said, "Ramon, I want you to know what I do in this house every day." And I read from my notebook. Every breakfast I had cooked since the day Diane showed me that spreadsheet. Every load of laundry. Every vacuuming session. Every ironed shirt. Every evening I had spent reading Elena to sleep. Every afternoon I had spent helping Marco with his homework. Ramon put his phone face down on the table. He was listening. Then I showed them my research. I explained what these services cost in San Antonio. I said, I have been conservative with every single number here. I have not inflated anything. I have calculated what a household would pay for the services I provide every single week at the lowest reasonable market rate. I slid my spreadsheet across the table. I said, as you can see, the value of what I contribute to this household every month is considerably more than the cost of my groceries and my portion of the electricity bill. But I want to be very clear about something. I am not telling you this because I want to be paid. I am telling you this because I want to be seen. Because I came to this house as a mother and a grandmother, not as a burden. And I deserve to be treated like one. The table was very quiet. Ramon picked up my spreadsheet. He looked at it for a long moment. His face did something complicated, the way faces do when a person is realizing something they should have realized a long time ago. Elena said, Grandma, you cook us breakfast every day? I said, every single day, my love. She said, I didn't know someone got paid for that. I said, they don't always get paid. But they should always be appreciated. Marco said, Grandma, is that the spreadsheet I helped you make? I said, yes. He looked so proud. He sat up a little straighter in his chair. Diane had not said anything. She was looking at the table in front of her. Her face was not angry. It was something else. Something that looked, if I am being honest, a lot like shame. Ramon set the spreadsheet down and he looked at Diane and he said, Diane, did you really show my mother a document calculating her household expenses? Diane said, I was just trying to have a practical conversation about money. Ramon said, that is not what I asked you. There was a long silence. Then Diane said, yes. Yes, I did. Ramon nodded slowly. He looked at me and he said, Mama, I am sorry. I did not know this was happening. I am sorry. I told him I knew he did not know. I told him I was not angry with him. I said, I raised you better than to make your mother feel like a number on a page, and you would not have done this, so I know you did not do it. Diane said, Marisela, I did not mean for it to come across the way it did. I looked at my daughter-in-law and I said something that I had thought about very carefully. I did not say it with cruelty. I am not a cruel person. I said, Diane, I understand that money causes stress. I understand that having an extra person in your home changes things. If you needed to have a conversation with me about finances, you could have come to me like family. You could have said, Marisela, we are feeling the strain and we want to figure this out together. I would have understood that. I would have sat with you and we would have worked it out. Instead, you made a spreadsheet with my name on it and calculated how much of a burden I was, and then you turned off the lights while I was sitting in the room, and you made comments about groceries every time I was standing nearby. And I have been doing everything in this house every single day for 3 years, and you have never once said thank you. Diane looked up at me then. Her eyes were bright. I do not know if that was anger or something else. I still do not know. I said, I am 83 years old. I have worked hard my entire life. I raised that man sitting next to you by myself after I lost his father. I have never asked anyone for anything I did not earn. I am asking you now to treat me like a human being. That is all. Just a human being. Nobody spoke for what felt like a very long time. Then Elena climbed down from her chair, and she walked around the table, and she put her small arms around me and she hugged me. She said, I love you, Grandma. You make the best breakfast. I held that child and I did not cry. I held it together. But it was close. That night, after the children were in bed, Diane knocked on my door. I said, come in. She came in and she stood near the door and she said, Marisela, I owe you a real apology. Not an explanation. An apology. I waited. She said, what I did was wrong. It was cold and it was disrespectful and you deserved so much better than that. I've been stressed about money and instead of talking to you like a person, I turned you into a problem to solve. That was wrong. I am sorry. I looked at her for a moment. I said, I accept your apology, Diane. And I mean that. But I also need you to understand that sorry fixes the present. It does not erase the past few months. I have been feeling small in this house for a long time, and that is going to take more than one conversation to heal. She nodded. She said she understood. I said, I want us to be okay. I want this family to be okay. But it has to be real. Not just polite. Real. She said, I want that too. Things are not perfect now. I want to be honest about that. There are still awkward moments, still silences that stretch a little too long sometimes. But Diane said thank you last Tuesday when I made breakfast. She said it quietly, sort of quickly, like she was still getting used to the word. But she said it. And I told her she was welcome. And we both moved on to our mornings. Ramon and I have been talking more. He calls me on his lunch break now, just to check in. He says, "How are you doing today, Mama?" And he means it. He actually wants to know. He told me he was going to make sure things were different going forward. I told him I believed him because I raised him and I know who he is. Marco told me last week that he wants to be a librarian when he grows up. He said, because Grandma knows everything. I told him librarians do not know everything. They just know where to find it. He thought about that for a second and he said, okay, that's even better. I laughed out loud. I have not laughed out loud in this house for a while, and it felt good. It felt like breathing after holding your breath too long. Elena still hugs me every single morning before she goes to school. Every morning, without fail, she comes to the kitchen while I am cooking and she wraps her arms around my waist and she says, "Good morning, Grandma," and then she goes and sits at the table and waits for her food like a tiny patient empress. She is 6 years old and she is already one of my favorite people on this earth. I am still here in this house in San Antonio. I am still cooking breakfast every morning and doing laundry and vacuuming on Thursdays and reading to Elena at night. I am still here because this is my family and I choose to be here. Not because I have nowhere else to go. Because I choose this. And that choice belongs to me. I am 83 years old and I have been through things that would make a spreadsheet look very small and very silly. I buried my husband. I raised a son alone. I worked for 41 years and I gave everything I had to children who were not even my own because that was my job and I loved it. I am not a burden. I am a woman who has been carrying weight her whole life, and I have done it with my back straight and my chin up, and I am not about to stop now. So if anyone ever shows you a spreadsheet with your name on it and a column labeled expenses, remember something. You are worth more than any number anyone can put next to your name. Your presence, your love, your time, your experience, your history, none of that fits in a cell on a spreadsheet. And do not let anyone make you forget that. Not even the people you cook breakfast for every morning. And if you are an older person watching this right now, sitting somewhere wondering if you are too much for the people around you, hear me say this clearly. You are not too much. You never were. Not once. Now I want to hear from you. Tell me where you are watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you love your grandmother, if she has ever cooked you breakfast or ironed your clothes or stayed up late worrying about you, give this video a like, subscribe so you never miss a story, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Until next time, this is Marisela Vega, San Antonio, Texas, reminding you that 83 is not old. It is experienced.